Huawei is very dangerous.
Rarely does a country go to war with a private company.
We have met the enemy, and it is Huawei.
We're not going to do business with Huawei.
Huawei represents a national security risk.
But is this really about Huawei, or is it something bigger than that?
On December 8, 2025, President Trump stood up and announced what should have been the biggest tech deal of the decade. Nvidia could finally sell its high-end H200 AI processors to Chinese companies. After years of blocking these sales, this was supposed to unleash billions of dollars in orders. Chinese tech giants were supposedly starving for these chips. But here's what nobody expected. China said no. They're not just declining politely, they're actively walking away. And that's left everyone in Silicon Valley and Washington asking the same question. How did we screw this up so badly? Let me take you back to where this disaster actually started. In October 2022, the Biden administration dropped a massive export ban on advanced semiconductors going to China. They specifically targeted Nvidia's H200 chips, along with AMD's MI250. This wasn't some symbolic gesture. This was designed to cut China off from the world's most powerful computing hardware. The impact on Nvidia was absolutely devastating. The company had controlled roughly 95% of China's AI chip market. Overnight, that number fell to zero, not a slow decline, literally zero. In a single quarter, Nvidia lost an estimated $8 billion in sales from just one product category. That's 20% to 25% of their entire data center revenue vanishing in 3 months. Fast forward to December 8, 2025. Trump announces on Truth Social that he personally called President Xi Jinping and told him the good news. Nvidia can now export the H200 chip to approved Chinese buyers. Trump framed this as a genius move that protects national security while creating American jobs and keeping the United States ahead in artificial intelligence. He even took shots at the Biden policies, saying they forced American companies to waste billions developing inferior products that slowed down innovation and cost jobs. On paper, this looked like everyone wins. American companies get their Chinese customers back. China gets access to powerful chips. And Washington looks like the dealmaker. But then you read the actual terms of the deal and everything falls apart. First, every single sale requires individual approval from the U.S. Commerce Department. This isn't a blanket authorization. Every buyer gets investigated. Every intended use gets examined. Any connection to military organizations, government agencies, or research institutions gets you automatically banned. And Washington can cancel or pause shipments whenever they want for whatever reason they decide. The logistics alone are insane. These H200 chips get manufactured in Taiwan, then they have to be shipped to the United States for a national security screening, and only then can they go to China. You're talking about a piece of silicon flying thousands of miles just to get inspected and approved by bureaucrats. But here's where it gets truly absurd. The U.S. government is taking 25% of the revenue from every chip sold. 1 out of every $4 goes straight to Washington. Whether it's through tariffs or licensing fees or some other mechanism, 25% disappears before Nvidia even sees it. And remember, these chips already cost tens of thousands of dollars per unit. When they tried this same approach with the weaker H20 chips, Washington wanted a 15% cut. That deal never went through because nobody wanted it. Now Trump raised it to 25%. And this applies to AMD and Intel too, not just Nvidia. When you add up the base price, the 25% government fee, compliance costs, legal reviews, and supply uncertainty, the total economics become completely ridiculous. So what did China do? They showed almost zero interest. Reports came out that Beijing is considering its own approval system to tightly control which domestic companies can even purchase the H200. The Chinese Foreign Ministry gave one of those carefully worded diplomatic statements about pursuing cooperation, but there was absolutely no excitement. Industry insiders started saying that Chinese firms were either hesitant or flat out refusing to place orders. After being locked out for years, the opportunity suddenly didn't look appealing anymore. Here's why Chinese companies are walking away. And this is where it gets embarrassing for Washington. First is the trust issue. Chinese tech giants looked at this deal and realized they'd be building their entire AI infrastructure on hardware controlled by a foreign government that openly calls them a strategic rival. The US can cut off the supply chain overnight if relations get worse. There are concerns about surveillance capabilities built into the hardware, about restrictions on which AI models can be trained, about backdoors that might exist. One Chinese analysis put it bluntly, core computing capabilities must never be vulnerable to external control, especially from the United States. No serious technology company can accept that risk. Second, the money doesn't work. These H200 chips already sell for tens of thousands of dollars each. Add the 25% fee on top. Then layer in all the compliance costs and legal expenses. Then factor in the reality that supply could be cut off at any political moment. Chinese companies did the math and realized they're paying premium prices for hardware that comes with massive strings attached. It's a terrible deal. Third, and this is crucial, the H200 is already outdated technology. It's built on the Grace Hopper architecture, not the cutting-edge Blackwell B200 chips that remain completely banned. It's nowhere near the upcoming Vera Rubin processors either. For certain workloads, the B200 is almost 10 times faster than the H200. So China would be paying inflated prices to buy last-generation technology while being permanently kept one step behind the latest advances. By design, Chinese companies can never access the absolute newest chip. They're always chasing yesterday's innovation. But the fourth reason is the one that should terrify policymakers in Washington. China doesn't actually need these chips anymore. This is what US planners completely failed to anticipate. In 2018, China's semiconductor equipment localization rate was just 12%. By 2024, that number jumped to 40%. In 6 years, it nearly tripled. US sanctions didn't slow China down. They accelerated local innovation at an incredible pace. Huawei is now investing over 20% of their revenue into research and development. That works out to roughly $71 million being poured into R&D every single day. Huawei has built a complete domestic ecosystem covering chip design, materials, manufacturing equipment, and packaging. Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia, stood on stage and admitted something that should send chills through Wall Street. He said his company went from 95% market share in China to zero almost overnight, not because Nvidia's chips got worse, not because competitors made better products, but because Beijing decided American semiconductors were no longer welcome. On September 17, 2025, the Cyberspace Administration of China issued new guidance that changed everything. ByteDance, the company behind TikTok, and Alibaba, one of the world's largest tech companies, received orders to immediately stop testing and cancel all purchases of Nvidia's RTX Pro 6080A chip. These weren't random chips. Nvidia had specifically engineered the RTX Pro 6080A to comply with US export controls. The chips were designed to replace the H200, which got banned earlier in 2025. Companies had already begun large-scale trials with Nvidia's server suppliers. Then China shut it all down instantly with one directive. In a high-security facility in Dingguan, something impossible just happened. Huawei confirmed testing of a homegrown EUV machine that wasn't supposed to exist for another decade. This is the technological earthquake nobody saw coming, and every assumption about Western chip dominance just got shattered. ASML, the Dutch company holding the global monopoly on EUV lithography machines, watched their stock drop 7% when the news broke in March 2025. For years, these $380 million machines were the untouchable foundation of modern computing. The reason your smartphone runs advanced AI and why Nvidia dominates artificial intelligence. China has been completely locked out since 2019 when US sanctions hit Huawei and banned ASML from selling these systems to Chinese firms. Western experts were unanimous. It would take China 10 to 15 years to develop comparable technology. ASML CEO Christophe Fouquet confidently stated in December 2024 that China was a decade behind. They were catastrophically wrong. Reports exploded across the industry, confirming Huawei is testing a prototype EUV machine at its Dingguan facility. Trial production is scheduled for Q3 2025, with mass production targeting 2026. This is not speculation. Reuters confirmed in December 2025 that China secretly completed an EUV prototype in Shenzhen. The machine is functional, generating extreme ultraviolet light, and testing is already underway. The technology behind this breakthrough is called LDP, or laser-induced discharge plasma. While ASML uses laser-produced plasma that fires 50,000 pulses per second at microscopic tin droplets, China's approach is fundamentally different. LDP vaporizes tin between electrodes, then zaps it with high-voltage discharge to create plasma-emitting EUV light at exactly 13.5 nanometers, the precise wavelength needed for etching microscopic 3-nanometer circuits. The physics is simpler, the footprint is smaller, and the cost is dramatically lower than ASML's behemoth. Harbin Institute of Technology officially announced on January 3, 2025, that they successfully developed this 13.5 nanometer EUV light source. Professor Xiao Yongping's team won first prize at the Hongjiang Province Science and Technology Innovation Competition for their discharge plasma extreme ultraviolet lithography light source project. The LDP system achieved power levels between 100 watts and 150 watts by mid-2025. While lower than the 250 watts required for high-volume manufacturing, it is sufficient for first light testing of 5-nanometer class logic circuits. Technical specifications leaked from the Shenzhen facility show the machine achieved a stable 13.5 nanometer EUV beam with conversion efficiency of 3.42%. Industry experts note that 5% to 6% efficiency is required for commercial throughput, but this represents massive progress from previous experimental results. The reality check. China's prototype currently trails ASML's sophisticated systems. Current production yields are approximately 20%, far below the 70% to 90% yields that ASML machines achieve. Goldman Sachs released analysis stating that China's homegrown lithography machines remain approximately 20 years behind global standards. The prototype reportedly can only produce 65 nanometer chips, nowhere near the 3 nanometer capability needed for cutting-edge processors. But here is where the story gets dangerous for the West. This is not just Huawei working alone. SMIC, China's leading foundry, is deeply involved. Shanghai Institute of Optics and Fine Mechanics contributed high-precision reflective mirrors. Chongqing Institute of Optics provided specialized components. Multiple research teams across China simultaneously achieved breakthroughs in different aspects of EUV technology, suggesting well-orchestrated national strategy rather than isolated research efforts. The Chinese government committed $37 billion to $40 billion specifically for EUV lithography development, with additional investments in semiconductor self-sufficiency totaling over $150 billion through 2025. This is China's version of the Manhattan Project. Former ASML engineers are at the center of this breakthrough. Reuters reported that the prototype was developed by former ASML engineers who reverse-engineered EUV machines while working under aliases to maintain secrecy. Recruitment campaigns beginning in 2019 offered signing bonuses of 3 million to 5 million yuan, equivalent to $420,000 to $700,000, along with housing subsidies. Lin Nan, ASML's former head of light source technology, now leads a team at the Chinese Academy of Sciences Shanghai Institute of Optics that filed 8 EUV light source patents over the past 18 months. Why does 3 nanometers matter so profoundly? A 3 nanometer chip can pack nearly twice as many transistors into the same space as 7 nanometer chips, dramatically increasing processing power while reducing energy consumption by up to 30%. Nvidia lost $127 billion in market value when news broke about Huawei's Ascend 910C chip matching performance of Nvidia's H200. When the world's leading AI chip manufacturer publicly acknowledges a Chinese competitor's progress, it validates the threat level. If Huawei and SMIC successfully execute this plan, ASML's monopoly crumbles. China's cheaper homegrown EUV system could flood the market, undercutting ASML's $380 million machines. The U.S. sanctions designed to cripple China's technological capabilities have dramatically backfired. Instead of crushing China's semiconductor ambitions, they ignited an unprecedented push. Did America's chip war just create the very competitor it was designed to prevent? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories shaping our technological future.